afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Larry Kaiser, and I am the Vice President of Marketing and Communications here at Optimum Healthcare IT. Today's webinar is entitled Innovative Approaches to IT Team Transformation. And our speakers today are Jeff Blanding, who is Optimum's Executive Vice President of Implementation and Optimum CareerPath Services, and Christy Lanciati, who is Optimum's Vice President of Managed Services. For those of you who are not aware of who Optimum Healthcare IT is or what we do, we are a full-service healthcare IT staffing and consulting firm, and our services fall into 4 buckets as being shown on the screen. We have our EHR services, which includes advisory, implementation, training, activation, staffing, and managed services. We have our TrustPoint technical services, which revolves around security, service management, ServiceNow, and other aspects of that area. We offer our Optimum CareerPath program, which is a proactive talent acquisition strategy, which reduces the overall cost of healthcare initiatives. And then we have our ERP services, and those focus on advisory, implementation, staffing, and system selection. So with that brief overview of who Optimum is, I will hand the webinar off to Jeff Blanding, who will cover the objectives of today's webinar and begin our presentation.
Thanks, Larry. So with Optimum's experience over the last decade working with healthcare IT teams and the service lines that Larry just outlined, we've really seen the challenges that our clients are facing up close and tried to work with them to come up with solutions to those challenges. So today we're going to start by discussing some of the biggest issues facing you and your IT teams, and then we'll talk through some techniques that we've developed to help both our Optimum teams internally and then also our client partners face those challenges head on and really transform their teams to meet the needs of today and in the future. So those techniques are going to cover, first, rethinking how you recruit and the types of talents that you really need. Second, making sure that your employees have the future-proof IT and soft skills that they're going to need to be successful and ultimately to make your team and your organization successful. Third, improving your efficiency and your employee engagement by looking at outsourcing options, both for talent acquisition and maintenance functions. And then finally, we'll discuss the importance of mentorship and management best practices to keep your team engaged and high functioning along the way. First, on the next slide, I'm going to discuss some of the challenges that we're seeing that are affecting IT teams in the current climate, just to set the stage for some of the challenges that likely all of you are seeing here. So the biggest challenge that we see right now is really the war for talent. I think this is probably the most competitive IT talent environment we've seen for years and very possibly ever in the healthcare IT space. So that really means that the cost of keeping your most tenured employees is higher than ever. And additionally, all the remote work options that are available mean that you're now competing with deep-pocketed prestigious companies across the country. So no longer just your neighborhood health system or the health plan down the street that can lure people away. It might be someone on the opposite coast, somewhere where they can afford to pay much higher salaries or have different and better benefits. So that's certainly a challenge. Then on top of that, obviously, we've got the great resignation, but we also have ongoing waves of retirements. You have baby boomers coming up to retirement age, and really just that kind of cyclical turnover in the workforce. So all of that together means that really you need to future-proof your workforce by focusing on your recruiting and training pipeline to include high-potential entry-level employees. The challenge there is entry-level employees also bring a great deal of risk. Millennial and Gen Z employees, for example, we see having up to a 50% attrition rate within the first year. So while entry-level employees are a compelling option, there's also that great risk factor that you might wind up making a pretty substantial investment in recruiting and then training only to lose that employee within a couple of years or even a few months there. Another thing to note is the IT environment of today is really demanding a different type of skill set, with the IT environment being increasingly complex and also increasingly integrated. So a legacy focus on any one individual application or vendor doesn't necessarily give your end users what they need. Really, they're looking for that end-to-end understanding of workflows. And so while technical skills continue to be very important, it's also very important to have employees that understand the overall context that the end users are operating in and have the critical thinking skills to think outside of any individual application silo and really support that workflow and those end users holistically, regardless of what system they happen to be operating in at any individual step in their workflow. Finally, I think we all recognize the importance of diversity in our teams, and really, the work that you all do supporting the operating systems that power healthcare in the United States. Having a diverse perspective is really key to ensure that our technology is usable and really supports both our patients and our clinicians. And so building that diverse team is certainly a challenge, and bringing more diverse employees into your teams is critically important, but also a challenge for you and for your HR teams. So before we talk about how to address those issues, we're going to talk just a little bit about our teams here at Optimum and some of the perspective that we're bringing to those challenges and some of the solutions that we've found. So on the next slide, my name is Jeff Blanding, as Larry said, and one of the teams that I have the privilege of leading at Optimum is our CareerPath program. And CareerPath is really focused on solving many of the problems that I shared on the previous slide. And we do that by recruiting, training, and placing entry-level employees into needed healthcare IT roles and needed technologies. And this really allows our clients to remove some of the risk that I talked about of bringing entry and level employees on, but then also reap the benefits of well-trained and enthusiastic new workers that will help with some of those attrition and resignation challenges that I mentioned. So in doing that, we've gained, I think, some pretty valuable perspective into how entry-level employees can add value and support transformation of your team and really help you get ready for the challenges of both today and tomorrow. And so we've learned some valuable lessons about how to recruit for the right fit, how to train someone who is more entry-level to really be ready to support the demands of the healthcare business. And that includes really a focus on soft skills. It includes a focus on a training program that we've developed in partnership with Chime that's really focused on training on the healthcare IT context and then key soft skills, and then finally layer on the technical training, but really as a multi-piece training effort there. And so really, I believe that legacy focus on training solely on applications has caused some of the silos that maybe have contributed to our current challenges, or at least haven't quite prepared us to a future that really needs us to have that more integrated view for end users and for that business. So really, that's kind of the background we're coming from the CareerPath program. And we'll talk a little bit more about what we're doing with recruiting and what we're doing with training, and then hopefully how you can take some of those techniques and what we're doing with mentorship and management and incorporate them into your own team and into your own efforts. And I'll turn it over to Christy, and she'll tell you a little bit more about what she's doing on the managed services team as well.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Jeff. Christy Lanciotti, and as Larry said earlier, I'm the VP of our managed services team. So a quick overview of what we do and support. Our managed services team supports a wide range of maintenance tasks, typically for EHR systems, and we support clients across the country. So because of that wide range of maintenance tasks, our approach has been to create a blended team that is comprised of entry-level and also very experienced senior-level team members. And one of the things that we really focus on there, and why we use a blended team, is because we want to align experience with the tasks at hand and the things we need to accomplish for our clients and for the maintenance of their system. And we also want to make sure that the work that our team is doing is engaging and interesting, right? So, we have a senior level team member who doesn't necessarily want to do that basic configuration task all of the time, but an entry-level team member finds that really interesting, and it creates a great opportunity for that senior level person and that entry-level person to work together as well. We also hire for fit, especially for the type of work that we perform. This is typically maintenance work, which is different than project work and implementation. There's lots of customer service and lots of documentation needs around maintenance and ticket documentation and all of those sorts of things. We also really want to understand an employee's approach to engaging and participating on a remote team. So these are all things that we look for in hiring for fit. And again, it's not just those hard skills, it's really those soft skills and how they are going to acclimate to our team and our culture and add to our team and our culture. So this blended model lends itself to, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, this natural mentor-mentee relationship. So part of us hiring for fit includes screening for the ability to mentor and train. And this is a really important skill, especially for our customer-facing analysts. And to sort of incorporate into Jeff and his CareerPath program, we actually utilize our CareerPath program to establish a shared entry-level baseline of knowledge for our team that allows us to build up their knowledge and skills from there. So that's really helpful for our mentors as well, because they understand where our team members' skills are when they come and start on our team and have a good understanding of what those baseline skills are, so they can create different pathways or tracks for them that make sense with the application that they will be working in. Next, we also have a big focus on leveraging and sharing knowledge. Because our team members may support anywhere from 1 to 3 clients, we have a unique opportunity to compare and contrast build and best practices across clients. In a remote environment, we use this opportunity to foster a culture of communication that also increases our ability to become experts in any given support area. And what we've found is that this variety and the accompanying knowledge sharing is very engaging for most analysts. And the more they can learn about different approaches, either in their home application or in neighboring applications or tools, helps and it gives us better results in retention and success in maintaining our team and our core team. Lastly, we really have a big focus on evaluating our pipeline of work and hiring proactively. So evaluate, assess, and screen. In combination with evaluating our pipeline, we look at things like 9-box evaluations of our team members and assessments so that we always have a pulse on talent and our risk of turnover, right? So we may look at a 9-box or a different grid that compares skill with leadership ability. And where do all of our team members fall on that grid? So we can really understand where our gaps are on our team. So we look at things like that in combination with our pipeline. And then what we'll do is continuously screen and interview candidates aligned with those gaps or opportunities that our pipeline is showing and that our risk or talent assessment is showing. So this is a great segue into our next topic, really about rethinking what recruiting looks like when you identify those gaps and have those opportunities to look for new talent.
Yeah, and there are a few things here that we want to touch on, really focused on how you can ensure that who and how you're recruiting early in the process aligns with where you need to go as an IT team, as you think about how you're going to address the challenges and the opportunities that you have in supporting your business. Probably some of the things I talked about earlier, probably some other things that are more specific to your site. And I think the first thing is expanding who you're looking for. So many IT managers really look to check the boxes on experience and certifications. And while you certainly need an experienced base of employees on your team, I think when you focus solely on years of experience, you potentially miss whether an employee is really the right culture fit, whether they have the right customer facing mindset to support your users, whether they're going to be trainable on your specific processes and methodologies, all of those things that will be important. Obviously, the technical experience is important, but these other things will also be important to making sure that you have who you really need on your team. Additionally, having a pipeline of entry-level employees really allows you to guard against both that ongoing great resignation and then also those longer-term cyclical retirements. So having folks who will be coming in earlier in their career, who you can help to stick around for longer and get you through some of those vacancies that you likely already have or will pretty soon. A final thing there, as you're looking at folks who are more entry-level, it really lets you stratify your job responsibilities in a way that's going to hopefully increase job satisfaction for your more longer tenured employees. So they'll be able to hopefully push some of those lower skill, for lack of a better term, tasks down to folks who are more entry level, who will be able to use those types of tasks to learn. And that's really instrumental to the way the managed service team here at Optimum runs, is with that kind of constant stratification so that we can kind of have everyone really operating at the top of their license along the way. The next point is really broadening your geographic focus and looking outside of your geographic comfort zone. So with our CareerPath program, built into our methodology is that we relocate candidates to wherever the client placement and the client need is, which I think is fairly rare for entry-level employees, but it really lets us dial into the exact right fit and bring the right new unique talent to the clients wherever they are geographically. So with geographic boundaries being broken down, as more across the country allow 100% remote work, I think looking nationally really matches what your competition is doing, even if ultimately you're relocating to have an in-office presence and don't have that fully remote setup. And then the next point is really tied into those first two, and that's diversity. So I think ultimately building a more diverse team is going to rely on looking at different levels of experience and potentially at different regions. And really, if you continue to recruit from the same pool that you have historically, I don't think you're going to be able to change up your team or your approach very much. So I think the first two are really key to being able to go find that more diverse talent and bring those additional perspectives to your team and ultimately do a better job with those diverse perspectives in supporting your mission critical IT systems.
And then taking that from Jeff, another great creative option, especially for local talent, is to go to the source. So partnering with universities or other technical schools to attract talent. CareerPath has this ingrained as part of their practice, right? They recruit and hire talent from universities across the US. But we've done this directly in managed services too. We've partnered with leaders of local health information management programs at local colleges. And how we did this was really just starting with inquiry emails. And that led to lecturing on a few topics in person in the classrooms. And then eventually we established the relationship with the department chairs to where they would send their top performers per semester for consideration for us for our entry-level positions. So just reaching out and figuring out what your local schools are, technical colleges, community colleges, universities, the school you go to is going to depend on your talent need and all of those sorts of things. But it's likely that many leaders in your departments have longstanding connections to their universities or other community connections to local schools. So, ask the questions and use those connections. It's a great creative way to integrate into your community and get those resources from your community that can help your organizations move forward from an IT perspective. So, but if we've learned anything so far in this presentation, is that there's no silver bullet approach to recruiting. It's all about strategically diversifying your tools. And that's what we're talking about today. All of these different tools that you can utilize to try and form your IT team of the future. Not every organization can or will be an expert in every business function. So it's important to understand where your strengths and weaknesses are there. So maybe your HR department is excellent at recruiting clinical talent, but deficient in recruiting IT talent. It's something we see fairly regularly. And a great recruiting firm should understand your culture and all the elements that you're looking for in a full-time or contract to hire role. The situation could also be that you don't have a great local pool of candidates or talent, or maybe you have continuous turnover in this competitive market that we're seeing. In this case in particular, outsourcing support could be an option versus just contracting with the firm to fill some positions for recruiting. But in any of these strategies, one of the important underlying requirements for recruiting and recruiting differently is truly understanding the scope of work that you're looking for. So I touched on this a little bit earlier, but you really need to think differently about your roles to get different results. So Jeff said this earlier too. What hard and soft skills are necessary? Can you look out of industry to hire and then train them up on the hard skills that they need? Also thinking about what overqualified candidates. There's been a couple articles out recently about overqualified candidates not getting positions. So, maybe if you understand and are transparent about the scope of the role and the salary expectations, would it be a strategy to position that overqualified person to mentor and train someone to eventually take over that work as the more qualified candidate progresses quickly in the organization? Lastly, it's important to think about the scope of work today, but as Jeff said, also in the future, positioning yourself for the future. So are you going to need multiple doers or experts in a particular role who aren't interested in being a manager? Because not everyone can or wants to be a manager. So how do you hire now to plan for that team that you'll have tomorrow? And then on top of that, thinking about, do you have the positions and career paths defined to support that? So not every career path needs to lead to a management role. So it's thinking about the career paths in that way as well. So I'll turn it over to Jeff to talk a little bit more about the importance of training your team for the future.
Definitely. And in the CareerPath program, training is absolutely key to our approach, because really that's what's allowing us to take fresh college graduates and get them fully prepared to work on your teams on day one. So as we were designing the CareerPath training program, one of our early realizations is that the technical certification is really one piece of the puzzle in talent development. And I think that's true of our entry-level CareerPath consultants, but is also true of more experienced team members as well. So especially in healthcare, I think that understanding the needs of the end users and what they need to accomplish in the real world is critically important to being able to configure the IT systems the right way. So the healthcare industry background is baked into the class that we developed in partnership with Chime. And that's the first piece that folks coming through our CareerPath program get. And really that covers healthcare delivery in the United States. It covers the revenue cycle. It covers the regulatory environment, et cetera, so that our apprentices understand where their IT role and some of the systems that they support fits into that big picture. So I think that's important for entry-level folks. I think it's also important for your more experienced employees and making sure that they're up to date on what's going on with the reimbursement environment, what's going on with the regulatory environment, some of the things that are coming through Congress or through regulatory bodies in the current year, so that they really have that information handy as they're working with end users. They understand that overall context. Another piece that I think is increasingly important for our IT analysts is soft skills. So in 2021, your IT support team isn't hidden away in the basement behind their screen. They're really front and center with your end users. They're leading governance meetings. They're working side by side with their business stakeholders. So communication skills and executive presence are critically important to being able to do all of that. And again, I think that's true of new employees, but it's equally true of your long tenured employees, especially those who maybe spent their early career in the 90s or in the early 2000s, when it was a little bit of a different environment. Maybe they're more code focused, and so the the end user interactions are maybe an area where they could use a little bit of upskilling. Now, the hard skills, certainly the hard skills are important. And I think one of the things to keep in mind is, like I said, they're one piece of the puzzle. And sometimes that's actually the piece that you can add in afterwards. So I think it's very common for hiring managers to have that checklist to say, you need these 5 certifications and you need 10 years of experience with these individual pieces of software. With some of the harder to fill roles out there, and I'm thinking of systems like ServiceNow or Salesforce that are a little bit more, perhaps more modern, there's often just a deficit of experienced resources there, or resources at all, really. And so I think thinking about those hard skills as just one piece of the puzzle, sometimes that's the piece that you can add on afterwards. So if you can get someone who you think is going to work really well with your team and is going to have the soft skills, understand the context they're operating in, being able to really integrate with your end users, maybe the hard skill is what you train them up on it. And so not always necessarily looking for those hard skills and those technical certifications as a deal breaker. Finally, while a lot of what we're talking about is relevant to entry-level training, really investing in the ongoing training is going to keep your employees engaged. And then just as importantly, prepare them for the ever-changing responsibilities. And that really prepares your team to be more future-proof. And I think with the ever accelerating pace of technology, it's very likely that the technologies that your team is working with in 5 years are going to be different than what they're working with today. And then that will be the same 5 years from that and 5 years from then. So it's going to be this continual process to learn new technologies, to learn what's going on in the healthcare ecosystem. And so really that ongoing training, that ongoing upskilling is going to be key. And the sooner you start it, the better to be prepared as that change just continues to accelerate. So continuing on that note, Christy will talk a little bit about some of those key skills that we need to keep in mind for a modern IT workforce.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So as I was, thinking about this and preparing for our webinar today, it made me think about how early on in my career, I used to reflect on the fact that, man, I really wish that my IT classes in college focused on how to operate just within a conference call. I wasn't prepared for, one, the amount of conference calls I'd be on as I moved up in the leadership ranks, and two, how to best assert myself and adapt to the overall norms and behaviors. So it seems basic, but prepping entry-level team members with feedback around their performance on a conference call or a video chat, internally for sure, but especially if you're doing anything client or end user facing, all of that feedback really, really matters. And it's some of the things as senior leaders and managers that we tend to overlook because it's just something we get used to doing on a day-to-day basis. And the same thing goes for other basic functions like time management and preparedness. Again, it's things that, as successful leaders and managers, we do on a regular basis and don't even really think about as much anymore, especially from a training perspective. But there's a balance too, right? So when I think about training analysts, I think about critical thinking and problem solving skills. And this means letting analysts explore and grow on their own, but with guardrails and safety nets, right? We're talking about IT, we're talking about critical systems. We don't want anyone to just go out into the wild, wild west and learn and grow that way without any sort of rein in. But many of those entering the workforce now want that roadmap laid out for them. So how do we find that right balance? Entry-level team members right now, if they have a question, they ask Google and they get an answer. Maybe not the right answer right away, but they get an answer. So they're used to this sort of, let me ask a question, I'll get an immediate answer. But what we have to do is leave room for team members to come to their own conclusions and use those critical thinking skills, and then reach out to their mentors or peers for validation and direction. Not necessarily the whole answer, but again, that validation, that next step, that direction, so they can have exercise and practice in using those critical thinking skills. again, transparency is very important, creating those pathways and for escalation and career and growth and all of those things are important. But building a team and culture that promotes exploration and creativity, not just an answer, benefits everyone on the team. And then in a world of continuously changing IT tools, as Jeff touched on, certifications help us when comparing candidates, all of those sorts of things. But it's not an end all be all. It establishes that baseline level of knowledge and experience, but also a dedication of that team member to understanding the tool. There is a level of effort that goes into attending the classes, studying for the tests, all of those things. But in addition, offering cross certifications or additional certifications is a great way to show investment in your team. Now, what our jobs are as IT leaders is to understand those high growth platforms. And as Jeff mentioned, what's going to be important in the next 5 years? And where does it make sense to cross certify or leverage our team members and their experiences or hard skills to align all of those and integrate those to position ourselves and our team members well. And again, not just siloed in one application, but across different tools that really make sense to work together. So the bottom line is modern IT teams are no longer the coders that sit in an office alone all day. They are collaborators. Soft skills are just as important as hard skills, and I'd venture to say soft are even more important when hiring entry-level staff for the future culture of your team, especially. So we'll shift next into how oversight and management plays into all of the topics we've discussed so far.
Thanks, Christy. And the overarching theme here is going to be making sure you have an intentional plan and attention. I think especially something like mentorship, hands-on employee engagement, it's easy to talk about, but really you need that plan. You need a framework to execute on to actually move the needle there and have an impact on your individual employees, which will in turn have an impact on what you can accomplish as a team. So I think when it comes to mentorship, especially, investing time and clearly defining how you're doing that is really important. So making sure that this is a defined role and responsibility, that when you say you have a mentor program or that you ask someone to be a mentor, it's very clear what that means, that's maybe it's an hour a week, it's meeting with the mentee regularly, it's going through a checklist of questions and onboarding assistance, whatever the case may be, just being clear what the expectations are in terms of time for both the mentee and the mentor. As for the mentee, what should you expect to get out of this? And for the mentor, what are we expecting you to do? The other thing with mentorship is to make sure that you put the right people into those mentor roles. Often, and I'd say usually, that isn't necessarily a manager. That obviously helps hopefully with having the time available. It also means that now as a employee, you have multiple points of contact who you can go to for different things, and you can ask your mentor things that maybe are more sensitive or that you worry about being judged on. Then you always have your manager as a backstop as well. So I think really taking the time, investing it, making sure that everyone understands what you're doing and why, and getting that buy-in is important. The next thing is transparency. So employees really want to understand where their job is going, and I think that's really important to keeping them around long term. So they want to understand, what are my expectations up front? What am I going to be evaluated on? What is the schedule upon which that evaluation will occur? What is my pay raise schedule? How does that relate back to my performance review? All those kinds of, I think, somewhat baseline things, but I think it's more common than you would expect that folks don't have that transparency. And that's something we try to do very clearly in the CareerPath program. Is from the very get-go, we have clearly defined, this is what your performance evaluation looks like. This is how it ties into your training goals, and then in your client goals. Once you're placed with a client, we also have a clearly defined raise cycle that ties back to that. to that performance evaluation that they see very early on. So there is really that, again, transparency up front of this is how everything works. This is what's expected of you. There's no moving the goalposts for you. It's all up front and very clear. I think the piece that goes maybe a little bit above and beyond there is then also starting to draw out what does a longer term career look like. And I think this gets more challenging, especially with some of the other challenges in play that we've talked about, but helping people to see what does a career over 3 or 5 or even 10 years look like with your organization. So making sure that they can see, here are growth opportunities in terms of being able to learn new things. Maybe here are growth opportunities in terms of varying levels of responsibilities. Here are growth opportunities in terms of different titles or being able to move horizontally across teams. So having those very clearly laid out so that folks can understand that if this is what I'm interested in, here's a path for that. And if it's something else that I'm interested in, there's a different path for that. So it's not a one size fits all thing, but it is, again, really comes down to clearly being able to see what those paths look like, having those clearly laid out for people. And I think some of the things that Christy will talk about here will also kind of talk about how you can start to implement those things and make sure that you're really on the same page with your employees on some of those items.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So I think about, understanding team members' interests and all of those sorts of things. Surveying regularly really is important to understand what's going well with your teams and what needs improvement. But when I think of surveying, I think of not only those big, regular formal surveys that can track, changes with standard questions over time. But I also think about those informal surveys that should be happening in one-on-ones, whether with your direct manager or your mentor. So those should be happening regularly too, to assess for career development and growth opportunities. And then I also think about, in this new remote environment, there are a lot of platforms out there now that offer real-time survey capability and engagement in remote meetings. So there are applications, I can think of a few like Pulse or Mentimeter, that give you real-time feedback and engagement statistics when you are doing meetings with your team. The ability to communicate through chat while you're on a meeting, the ability to show emojis while you're in a meeting, from an engagement perspective, or answer survey questions in real time. So, which brings me to communication. And I feel so strongly, myself for the past pre-pandemic, 5-6 years working remotely and running teams remotely, that communication platforms are more important than ever. They have to be predictable and they have to be reliable. They also need to allow visibility and transparency into the organization, especially in a remote capacity or in a dual remote capacity. You have some people on site, you have some people remote. So, and thinking about all the things we talked about today, we're talking about a variety of ways you can build and flex your team. Maybe you have some outsourcing, maybe you have some programs that bring in junior level entry people and you have mentorship programs. You have parts of your team that are remote. You have parts of your team that are on site. So when you are developing your organizational strategy in that way, communication, challenges come up and communication again becomes even more important. So ingraining and integrating communication tools like everyone knows Microsoft Teams or Slack or things like that create a foundation to which everybody knows that they can find or reach the right person if they need them. There are also some simple basic things like if you're using directories or if you're using a Microsoft directory, keep it updated with direct reports and other functions of the team members, maybe their certifications, maybe where they live or where they're located, their time zones. All of these things really matter when you have team members that are in different locations, different time zones across the country. So all of that to say, when the team understands what the whole looks like, because that's what these communication platforms are really doing, they're trying to create this virtual visual of a whole. So when we can do that and we can create that visual, teams can function really well, even if they are comprised of a couple different tools and moving parts in the way that they function. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to talk a little more about one of those tools regarding outsourcing.
Thanks, Christy. And I think the first thing I'll say here is none of what we've been talking about is easy, so I don't want to make it sound like it is. We're talking about a mix of long-term strategic planning, demand management, HR policies, hands-on performance management. It's a lot of different things and a lot of different levels. So I think outsourcing and looking to partners to help with some of this is potentially a valuable option if you have the need. And I think there's a couple of different categories here that we'll talk about. So first off is from an advisory standpoint, depending on kind of where you are in terms of understanding what your team should look like and what your staffing gaps are, that can certainly be a valuable option. And generally that would be really kind of a team assessment and potentially some design support for you of helping you figure out, do you have the right org structure? Then within that org structure, do you have the right number of staff? Do you have the right number of the right qualifications? Do you have the right team? When you think about some of the more complex areas where you might have integration with like an informatics team or a data analytics team, is that the right structure for you? So I think that can certainly be a valuable option. And then that can help you figure out, how do you get from there to where you should be, whether that's some of the things we talked about looking at more entry-level employees or looking at a managed services arrangement to potentially reduce your cost and reduce the overhead on your team. There could be a lot of different outcomes on there, but I think that's something that often it can be valuable to have that outside perspective. And it's often, one, it's a perspective that's difficult to have when your head's down within the team. And two, it's something that's very difficult to carve the time out for internally when you have critical patient safety issues and urgent reimbursement issues that need hands-on IT support. It can be hard to take the time and really do that analysis and that assessment internally. The next piece I'll mention is assistance with recruiting and training. So there's plenty of services out there, CareerPath being one of them through Optimum here, that really let you outsource the expense and the complexity of finding and onboarding and training resources. And that can let you free up your in-house recruiting resources for potentially your most complex needs. So your HR team is likely pretty overwhelmed already with some of the needs in the nursing world and elsewhere. So if you can get some of those IT needs off their plate, that can definitely be helpful. There's also some ability there to essentially custom create some of those scarce resources. So for systems like Salesforce or Epic or ServiceNow, where you can outsource the recruiting and training of those resources to really fill that need with those custom resources, really trained to your specs, recruited to your specs, and that can be a valuable option to create those resources who might otherwise be somewhere between difficult and impossible to find. And then the final thing I'll mention is managed services. Obviously, we've got a managed services team here at Optimum. I think it can be a great way to reduce the workload on your in-house team and really take especially some of the tasks that might be less satisfying, some of the more rote and repetitive type of tasks off of your team's plate and really increase employee engagement in that way. Can also really increase your efficiency by reducing the switching costs in that your team doesn't have to constantly go from, working on the strategic project or the new initiative or the upgrade and then spend an hour handling maintenance tasks and lose some efficiency in the time to go between those two things there. And then finally, it really can allow you to focus your team on the highest value end user support, workflow design, strategic initiative type activities that are really going to ultimately have the biggest impact on your end users and have the biggest impact from having your most highly skilled, most engaged resources involved in those efforts. So I think there's several things to think about there. You know, if some of what we talked about today resonates with you, definitely some things to think about. And then Christy will talk a little bit more about if any of these are things you're interested in, what should you be looking for with those potential partners?
Thanks, Jeff. So, you know, when I think about finding the right partner, you know, I think about someone that wants to understand the strategy of my organization and where we are going to help and where they are going to help support us in achieving our goals now, but also in the future. So what does this mean? This means continued executive and leadership presence and clear communication. We really need to understand where my organization is going so that the vendor or the partner can align with us and support us in the direction that we're going. You want a partner that is always operating in an advisory fashion in some way. Your partner should be experts in the field that they're representing and can therefore advise on process and strategy, you know, really at any given moment in that field. They should also be forward thinking and provide thought leadership, especially from a technology perspective. And also have the ability to prove that they themselves are technology enabled. You know, what are they using for their teams to move themselves forward in the industry and the services that they provide? So it's important to make sure also that the values you hold as an organization, like workforce diversity and process and general organization, are aligned as well. And then finally, a vendor or an outsourcing partner is not transactional. It's integrated. So whether it be integration with leadership and leadership teams from an advisory perspective, or a managed service collaborating with their FTE counterparts on the client team, what there should be is shared interests and incentives on both sides that help pull those teams together and pull that partnership together. So throughout this presentation, Jeff and I have talked a bit about our team and our approach to setting ourselves up for future success. So in closing, we will share a little bit more about our services and how they might be able to benefit you in the development of your future IT teams. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff.
And hopefully it's not too much of a surprise that if you have any of the challenges that we discussed today, that we would love to be a part of the solution. One of the potential solutions is our CareerPath program that I talked a little bit about along the way. With CareerPath, really we're focused on recruiting and training the best of entry-level employees, so relatively new college graduates for the most part, and then placing them in a long-term contract to hire arrangement with clients like yours, where they're already trained on the Chime partnership course that we have, as well as in a specific technology like an Oracle or a PeopleSoft or ServiceNow or Epic, et cetera. And so I think there's a couple of value propositions here that I'll call out. So one, I think we have that recruiting pipeline that you might not have yet. So we look nationally. We have a handful, 5 or 6 very closely partnered university partners that we work with that allows us to be very proactive in our talent strategy and go meet with the CS Club or the different diversity groups or the health professions club and really bring people into the healthcare IT profession who might not have been looking for it. We can go out and educate them proactively about why it's a great field to work in and all the benefits and how rewarding it is overall, personally and professionally. And then we bring them through that training program. So the other piece I'll put a quick pitch in for is that ability to kind of custom create resources, which I think is really important, especially in this war for talent that we have right now and some of the newer technologies that are super difficult to find resources on. It's really a way to go custom recruit, find the exact profile you're looking for, and then custom train. So on those hard to find technologies like Epic or Salesforce or ServiceNow, but also on things like methodologies, like we have a project management track or a cloud track, where again, there's hard to find the experienced resources, and these are folks who are coming in more entry level, but at the same time, they're coming in without the bad habits and really with the ability to be molded to your processes, your end user facing methodology, and all those kinds of really important things. Diversity and inclusion is also a huge part of that. So I think that's something that's hopefully going to be important to all of you. And we have about a 65% rate of underrepresented minorities within our CareerPath classes so far, which we're very proud of. That's a big focus for us. And then the final piece I'll mention, I think there is a lot of financial and really risk benefit to CareerPath. Essentially what CareerPath allows you to do is take advantage of all the benefits of bringing entry-level people onto your team, but ultimately, since they're Optimum employees in a contract to hire arrangement, Optimum bears the risk over that first 2 years, so that if there is attrition, we're the ones who've made the investment up front and will be in charge of making it right for you and bringing in a replacement resource there. So we have very low attrition so far, but ultimately it is a way for you to de-risk that attrition onto us as your strategic partner. So that was the quick pitch for CareerPath. Love to talk more to you about it if anything there resonates. And then Christy's going to talk a little bit more about our managed services team to take us out today.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So on our managed services team here at Optimum, we like to think of ourselves as support experts and advisors. So what we really look to do is create long-term partnerships with our clients that allow their team to focus on things like new build projects and optimizations, while our team takes over the run activities. So maintenance, break fixes, queue monitoring, quarterly upgrades, all of those sorts of things. And those long-term partnerships create reliability. So when we think about run activities and maintenance activities, we want continuous monitoring there. We want to know that when someone goes out on vacation, that there's backup support there to ensure that all of these activities to keep the lights on from a day-to-day basis are running and are seamless. So we focus a lot on reliability and redundancies. But what a managed service also does for internal core teams at our clients is it actually promotes retention. Because what we look to do as support experts and advisors is take off those more mundane, routine tasks that a lot of analysts don't like to do or maybe prefer not to do, and allows them to build up new skills and applications that maybe they don't have a ton of experience in, but really want to learn and see how that relates to maybe their core application. They can create new build, they can work on projects they haven't done before. And that really bodes well for retention. Jeff mentioned earlier switching costs. So going back and forth between a project and maintenance and all of those sorts of things creates waste in an organization. And it also contributes to burnout for a team member. If a team member is trying to be one thing to everyone, it really can affect a team member's mental health and how they look at their job and how they're valued in their position. So we like to also think of our managed services as a retention strategy for our clients. And then ultimately, managed services and what we look to do is to help reduce your overall spend, right? Because in the traditional historical model of hiring in consultants, some organizations get into this continuous process of hiring consultants and keeping them on board, and it becomes sort of this revolving door of consultants at the top of your spend. So what we're looking to do with managed services and supporting these run activities is sort of come in at the bottom of that staffing pyramid and push your team up, which ultimately reduces the overall spend there. Because like I said earlier, we focus on a blended team, which allows us to align activities with experience level and bring down the overall cost of the service for our clients. And then lastly, one of the other value propositions for a managed service is that it's another lever for organizations to pull to scale and meet demand. So when you have another team that has been a partner with your team for 1, 2, 3 years that really knows your system, and you go through a merger or an acquisition and need to bring another hospital live, you have a lever to pull with a partner in a managed services team that can help you scale up to support that go live, take over some of those other projects that your core team has been doing, and allow them to focus on the new project at hand. And also know that once that new hospital or group of clinics goes live, that you are going to have a managed services team behind you that can grow and scale to support the new tickets and the new maintenance that's coming in going forward. So a little bit more about our managed service. Again, if you're interested, I'd love to have a more conversation with you. So feel free to reach out to me or Jeff or Larry going forward. All right, so with that, we are going to open up the floor for any questions that our attendees may have. I know Larry has been monitoring the chat and Q&A. Larry, anything from the audience today?
So first, thank you both. Really great presentation, very informative. I have not seen any questions come across yet, so I'll pose it verbally. If anybody has any questions they would like to discuss or bring up, please feel free to drop it into the chat box, and we will pose that question to either Christy or Jeff and get an answer for you. So I'll just wait a moment or two if someone's typing something. Well, Zoom is not showing me any indication that anybody is typing anything in the box, so I will make the assumption that there are no questions. So Jeff and Christy, again, thank you for your time. For those on the call, we will be posting a video of this webinar to our YouTube channel and to our website. So we will post on social media about that. And then Jeff and Christy's contact information is now on the screen if you are interested in reaching out. So again, thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you on our next webinar series. Have a great day.